If your car is anything like mine, your kids have utterly destroyed your backseat. Goldfish, fruit snack wrappers, lollipop sticks, you name it, it's all over. Say goodbye to all of that with Carcan. Carcan is a trash basket that fits right on the back of your seat. Going on a long trip, it can be used as a cooler or a storage bin. This thing is a game changer. Go to carcan.com and check out their wide array of vehicle storage accessories. That's carcan.com. Use the promo code JimMontgomery20 off for 20% off your order. That's carcan.com. Promo code JimMontgomery20 off. Carcan makes a great holiday present. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast that takes a trip down Philly sports memory lane. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to episode 60. If you are new, welcome. We are glad to have you. Can't believe we're on episode 60. It just seems like yesterday I was talking like a robot on the very first one where I was super nervous, even though I wasn't talking to anybody. But welcome. We've come a long way in a little over a year. So again, thank you. You're listening, so please do me a favor, like and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this. We are trying to grow, and whatever the algorithm is, this is what everybody tells me I need to worry about. So all your likes, all your subscriptions, any comments, anything you can, all does well for the cause. Be sure to tell somebody else as well. Spread the word. This is big on word of mouth. Like, I have people coming up to me and be like, hey, I heard about your podcast through blah, 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 blah. So thank you for your recommendations that way. Just let's grow this thing. I've been working on some new things, specifically increasing interaction. If you're only new here and you haven't checked out This Day in Philly Sports History, I also have a daily podcast where I do just that. I take a look at this day in Philly sports history and then give sort of the current state of Philly sports. We like to have a little bit of fun over there. So be sure to check that out as well. This day in Philly sports history, like and subscribe. But I've been trying to work on the audience interaction. I've been doing a question of the day, which for the month of November has really been growing and taking off. And we've had a lot of fun with that. I have a couple more big things on the horizon, hopefully within the next few weeks when it comes to fan interaction. But just like and subscribe, tell your friends, tell your boss, whoever. Just spread the word and let's make this thing grow. I'm looking forward to see where the next year takes us. All right, so we are going to do an episode today on the Frankford Yellow Jackets. It's been one that I've been sort of sitting on and just things have been coming up. We had the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame induction ceremony and all that. So I wanted to make sure I gave it the proper time and everything. And excuse me. If you do listen to This Day in Philly Sports History, you know I've been dealing with this horrible chest cough for about a week and a half, 2 weeks now, and it just doesn't seem to want to go away. So I do apologize for coughing into the microphone. But I've been sitting and waiting on something to do with the Frankford Yellow Jackets because it came up on one of the This Day in Philly Sports History, and I felt it deserved more than just the 2 to 5 minutes that I typically spend. As we know, the Eagles went into the bye week with an 8-1 record. They're coming off their Super Bowl win. Big game this week. I shouldn't say the Super Bowl win. Coming off the Super Bowl appearance. Wishful thinking, I guess, against the Chiefs, who they happen to play this week on Monday Night Football. And I felt that this was the perfect time to do it. As we know, the Eagles are a 4-time NFL champions. They won in 48, 49, and 60, and we all know they won Super Bowl 52. But the interesting thing is, they're not the first team in Philly to win an NFL championship. That would be those Frankford Yellow Jackets. And 2024, this year coming up, will mark 100 years since the first season in the NFL for the Yellow Jackets. They started in 1924, and we all remember, or most of us probably do, and if you're younger, go back and look, I'm sure your dad or you have an older brother or cousin or somebody who remembers this. Back in 2007, the Eagles did wear throwback Frankford Yellow Jacket inspired jerseys and helmets, like the whole 9 yards, for their 75th anniversary season. They were bright, they were yellow, and they were blue. But what is their story? What is the Frankford Yellow Jackets stories, and how did we go from the Frankford Yellow Jackets to the Philadelphia Eagles? And I will say a side note, and I didn't get a chance to watch it. I have it bookmarked and I have it saved. But apparently, the Frankfurt Historical Society, the two of the guys, I really wish but I just popped in, like I'd already prepared for this, so that's why it's not in my notes. But they, I guess, released a book on the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, and they had a live Q&A that was run by the Frankfurt Historical Society. I want to watch it, and it just was ironic that I chose this week, and I happened to see that. I believe it was Monday night. I think it was Monday night or Tuesday night when I was finalizing the notes for this that I saw that. So I don't know what it's like. It's a Q&A. They talk about their book, but it's the Frankfurt Historical Society, Frankfurt section of Philly. But back to the Yellow Jackets. Again, how did we get from the Yellow Jackets to the Eagles? And that's what we'll take a look at in this week's episode. We'll just kind of take a deep dive into the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. Want to show support for your Philly teams? Check out PhillyGoat.com. They have all your needs covered, whether it's Sixers, Flyers, Eagles, Phillies, Union, Philly boxing, Philly culture, Philly pride. There's something for you. They have tees, hoodies, hats, any color, any size you want, including kids. Go to PhillyGoat.com and use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off of your order. That's PhillyGoat.com. Be sure your shirt has the authentic goat on the sleeve and use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off your order. That's PhillyGoat.com. All right, so the early years of the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, they were started by the Frankfurt Athletic Association. And the Frankfurt Athletic Association had some other teams too. I think they had, I thought it was soccer, and I believe it may have been a women's football team or something. There was another sport that they played out of the Frankfurt Athletic Association, but they were an independent team. And that's kind of how football was back then. It was, college was king. And the NFL, like the thought of playing professionally was just sort of a relatively new kind of concept. So a lot of these teams pre-NFL, or like as the NFL was in its infancy, a lot of them were independent. It was just groups like athletic associations, like the Frankfurt Athletic Association, just playing games, and they excuse me, that cough. If you know anything about like Negro League baseball, what they did was that it was called barnstorming, and this is what a lot of these football teams did. They barnstormed and just played across the country, and whoever they could schedule and whatever made sense, they'd sell tickets, they play, and they move on to the next city. Well, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets became one of the best of barnstorming independent teams in the countries in the 1920s. And then in 1922, the Union Quakers of Philadelphia, they kind of folded and it sort of absorbed into the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. And they went on to win the official, or unofficial, I should say, city championship of Philadelphia. There were other teams. You had the Pioneer Athletic Association, the Jefferson Medical College, the Philadelphia Athletic Club. You had the Union Quakers, who folded and joined the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets of the Frankfurt Athletic Association. But there were these teams all around, and it's something that really piqued my interest. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to I want to do something where I look into the history of these independent football teams, and like things like that are the things that like really, I don't know. I'm a nerd. I'm a history nerd. You guys know I'm a former history teacher. So like things like that, like especially when it comes to sports, like why not? Like that's how I learned a lot of history. That's how I learned a lot of geography. Hell, I even learned math through sports. So don't judge. But stay tuned for that. But the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets won the unofficial city championship in 1922. And kind of started to catch, because they were one of the best amateur or independent teams in the country, started to catch the eye of the NFL, and they were playing some NFL teams as well. And the way the NFL was set back then, there wasn't necessarily a set schedule like how we have now. Like, we know going into tonight's, I'm taping this on a Thursday, but going into this week's slate of games, it's week 11. Well, it wasn't like that back then. It was more of like a college scheduling where you played the teams in the NFL, but like almost like the athletic directors kind of set that up, and they gave you like windows and things like that. And there was a champion named. So it was basically whoever had the best record was named the champion of the NFL. So you would play your NFL teams, but then they would play the independent teams like the Frankford Yellow Jackets. Again, a lot like college. Like, you have your conference schedule, you have your non-conference schedule. And I guess the difference is, unlike college where it's about sometimes, like, all of a sudden Alabama will have a cupcake coming up in a couple weeks, or they wanted to play the best teams to have better competition so they can make money, get better, and things like that, because the NFL, again, was still in its infancy, so any publicity it had was the best. So, like, they wanted their teams to play a Frankford Yellow Jacket team. They wanted their teams to kind of go around and play these teams to get more exposure, to hopefully grow the game and things like that. So in 1922 and 1923, the Frankford Yellow Jackets went 6-2-1 against NFL teams. So think about that. You have this group of independent players who aren't the professionals pretty much dominating the pros in the NFL. And again, I use the term pros a little bit more loosely than what we would think today. Back then, they had off-season jobs and things like that. But due to their success in those 2 years, as they started to become bigger, and they absorbed the Union Quakers of Philadelphia. They won the city championship. People wanted to play them, and they held their own. So what this did was it led the NFL to give Frankfurt Athletic Association a call and say, hey, do you want to join the NFL starting in 1924? The Clashing Conferences podcast is a football conference-specific podcast that brings together the everyday passion of real fans and their not-so-friendly friends for the purpose of real-life football entertainment. Aggressive but friendly competitiveness is the name of the game, as this group of NFC East fans jabs and banters each other, trying to prove their pointless points. With an internal competition within for weekly and end-of-the-season bragging rights, watch as this group will still boast and brag even when their teams fail to bring home the W. New episodes drop on Thursday, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so they said absolutely, because they were already dominating the NFL teams anyway. Why not? So their first season in 1924, they played their games at Frankfurt Stadium, which is on the corner of Frankfurt and Devereux. I'm kind of familiar with that area. I don't know what there is there now. It's been a while since I've been up that way. But if you do like a Google map, you can see the kind of the corner where the stadium was. But the first season, they went 17-3-1. They played 21 games, but 11-2-1 in league play. A lot of times, and listen to this, and imagine doing this today just because of the rules and the safety concerns, but they would play 2 games in a weekend. They would play their home game on Saturday. And if you are a listener of This Day in Philly Sports History, we talked about this a couple weeks ago on Election Day. But Philadelphia had what was known, or Pennsylvania, I should say, had what were known as blue laws, where you couldn't do certain things on Sunday because it dated back to William Penn and the Quakers. They wanted to keep it holy and not keep anybody from going to church and things like that. And Pennsylvania was one of the last teams to sort of get rid of those laws. So they would play their home game on Saturday, and then they would go on the road to play a Sunday game. And they won their first ever game against the Rochester Jeffersons, 21-0. And that year in 1924, they finished in third behind the Cleveland Bulldogs and the Chicago Bears, only by percentage points. And I mean, basically that tie didn't count in the standings. Had the tie counted, they would have been named the champion. The ties didn't count, I don't think, until probably like the 50s or 60s, maybe even later than that. Might have been when the NFL and the AFL merged. But think about that. First year in the league, had they not tied a game, they would have won the championship. So a couple things about that season. They set the rushing record for rushing touchdowns in a season. And I guess that includes all games they played. That record stood as the NFL record until last season. Ironically enough, the team that beat it, the Philadelphia Eagles, and they beat it in the NFC Championship game. The Eagles got their record-breaking rushing touchdown. I could not find, and I probably could have looked at it more, but I guess because it happened, it took the whole season into consideration, and since the Yellow Jackets played some non-NFL teams, then that counted. That's why they counted the playoff touchdowns for the Eagles, but it took that many years, almost 100 years, for somebody to break that record. And ironically, it was a team from Philadelphia. All right, the next season they went 13-7, finished 6th, but that's kind of misleading because it was a transition year. They had new coaching, some new players coming in, so the fact that they finished in 6th was good. However, the Frankford Yellow Jackets played a big part in the outcome of the team that was named the 1925 NFL Championship. You may have heard this. I've seen the NFL Network has a documentary on it. I've read many articles about this, and it's like a very interesting thing, and it just goes to show how, as much as people complain about the state of college sports today, and I used to be a big person that said it was Villanova that kept Temple out of the Big East for years, and all of the sort of infighting, it all came down to money. So listen to this story. This goes back to the beginning of sports. The Pottsville Maroons had beaten the Chicago Cardinals 21-7 late in the season, probably around this time, for the 1925 season. Yes, the Pottsville Maroons was a team. Pottsville, not Pottstown. Pottsville, which is the birthplace of Yingling. But they beat the Chicago Cardinals 21-7, technically putting them in first place for the NFL, and they would have been named the champion. Only NFL games counted for the standings. However, they scheduled an exhibition game in Philadelphia against the Notre Dame All-Stars. Yeah, the Notre Dame College. Well, the Frankford Yellow Jackets said, no. They protested and said, not so fast, my friend. Because they had a game scheduled that same day in Frankfurt. I guess I should have probably looked this up too, and I assume that the Notre Dame All-Stars and the Pottsville Maroons played at Franklin Field. But because Frankfurt had a home game that day, they said, no, you're violating the territorial rights, which again, I guess were laws, but they said it would have taken, because it was within the city limits, they were in violation. And they went right to the NFL president, protested, who the NFL president says, yeah, you kind of aren't following the rules, suspended them for the season, and basically cost them the championship. So the point of the story is the Pottsville Maroons actually won the NFL championship in 1925, and because the Frankford Yellow Jackets protested because they played an exhibition game, not even an NFL game, an exhibition game in Philly the same day as the Yellow Jackets, they did not win the title. And you can look it up. There's a lot of things about it. At one point, the NFL, I forget whether it was a petition or something, but they opened up a sort of they talked about opening up this case and maybe awarding it, but everybody completely shut that down because it would have completely, I guess, messed up the city of Chicago, the Cardinals, and their legacies and things like that. But that was sort of the highlight of the Frankford Yellow Jackets 1925 season, was costing the Pottsville Maroons their championship. All right. The following year, though, remember I said they were in transition. 1926, they went 14-1-2, and remember those two ties did not count in the standings. They dominated whoever they played pretty much all season, and they won the NFL championship. So it was the first NFL championship to ever come to Philadelphia, and it happened all the way back in 1926. We know they wouldn't get another one until 22 years later. But they dominated from start to finish. Here's the thing. The 14 wins was a pretty big deal for the team because they started to play more of a uniform schedule. Yes, they had won 17 their first year, but the 14 wins was the most wins by an NFL team in the regular season until the 1972 Dolphins did it. And then you had the 78 Steelers, the 83 Washington team did it. But those 14 wins, they were the last team, or I shouldn't say the first team to win 14. Actually, no, I'm saying that wrong. They had 14. It was the most until the 72 Dolphins. And then it was tied by the Steelers and Washington. And then in 1984, the San Francisco 49ers won 15, and that was the most. So imagine that. Like a team in 1926, their win total was the most in the NFL, tied by a couple teams, until 1984. That's just crazy if you ask me. But again, everything started to become more uniform as the late 20s and into the 30s. So that's why you didn't have like 17 games and playing 20 games a season and things like that. They started to become more. They were trying to become a more legitimate league. So post the NFL championship, though, 1927 they kind of fell off. It was another transition year. They went 6-9-3. 1928, they bounced back 11-3-2, took second place in the NFL, and then in 1929, 9-4-5. Imagine tying 5 games, and took third place that year. But ultimately, as we've talked about a few times with some of these teams, and just we talked a couple weeks ago about Connie Mack and the Philadelphia A's, the Great Depression sort of put a strain on a lot of professional sports. So we know the stock market crashed in 1929. The Great Depression was well underway. So in 1930, the Yellow Jackets could not afford some of their veterans. They went 4-13-1. And then a side sort of effect of that, and this is what happened with the A's as well, is you can't draw a ton of fans. So one, people didn't have a ton of money, and they were very cautious about what they spent their discretionary money on. But then, because the team itself wasn't drawing fans, they couldn't afford to play the players, so the product on the field suffered, which further hurt attendance, and it was just like a negative cycle where they just couldn't get out of it. And then 1931, their stadium was damaged in a fire before the season. And then it was tough for them to find a place to play, so they bounced around. They played some at the Baker Bowl, which was the Philly Stadium, Municipal Stadium, which would later become JFK. The problem with the fans and things of that nature, it was difficult to get to and from Frankfurt to those games, even for some of the players. And I mean, truthfully, I mean, yeah, you can hop on the L and then take the Broad Street line down, but it's still hard to get from Frankfurt to South Philly today for games. So that just the negative cycle just continued with the fans and everything. The NFL did agree to allow them to play out the string as a traveling team, just because they weren't drawing any fans and they were struggling to find places to play. So ultimately, they were just put on the road and everywhere they went. The highlight of that year is they beat the Chicago Bears 13-12 on October 26th. Now, this to me is a crazy stat. October 26th, 1931 was the last time a Philadelphia NFL team would win a game in the city of Chicago until 1999. Like, that just that means the Eagles had the worst luck against both the Cardinals and the Bears in Chicago. That's just crazy. So after 1931, obviously there was lack of fan support. They didn't even have a place to play. The team was suffering on the field. The ownership could not afford players, and they folded after that season. They suspended operations completely, and they were trying to find a buyer. And the NFL was like, if you can find somebody to buy it, we'll keep the Frankford Yellow Jackets in Philadelphia. Since they couldn't find a buyer, they returned the team to the league. And what that meant is, and we talked a lot about the territory, or not a lot, but we've talked about the territorial rights and why they cost the Pottsville Maroons their championship. So basically, they returned the rights to a team in Philadelphia, and I believe they returned everything, like the history of the Yellow Jackets. Remember what happened with the Browns and the Ravens when the Browns moved to Baltimore? They made Baltimore technically the expansion team, even though it was all the Cleveland players. But all the records and the history of Cleveland stayed with the city of Cleveland. Similar thing happened. So basically, the Frankfurt Athletic Association basically said, here, you can have everything Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, Philadelphia NFL related. Well, it didn't take long. 1933, the NFL awarded an expansion franchise to Bert Bell and Lud Ray. And basically they said, okay, here, you can have all of the assets of the Yellow Jackets. Here you go. Here's your NFL team in Philly. And ultimately, they decided they're going a completely different direction. They named them the Eagles. And most people think that the name came from the bald eagle being the national symbol of the United States and Philadelphia being the birthplace of the country and things like that. And really, because it happened during the Depression, a lot of people don't realize that the Philadelphia Eagles were named after the eagle that was the symbol of FDR's New Deal. A lot of times, like I said, it's still a similar type story, but I always thought, even as a kid, that it was because of the founding of the country and the bald eagle being the symbol, blah, 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 blah. And no, it was named after FDR's symbol for the New Deal. But because Bell and Ray bought the team and had all the assets, a lot of people just assumed that the Yellow Jackets kind of just sat 1932 out and then came back in 1933 as the Eagles. But that wasn't the case. I mean, Bell and Ray basically said, we don't want the Yellow Jackets. We're not buying the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. We're just buying the rights to a team in the Philadelphia area. And just because the team used to be in Frankfurt with the Frankfurt Athletic Association, that doesn't mean that's what we want, because we know they ended up playing down in Franklin Field for the longest time, and some of the other stadiums not up in Frankfurt. And since there was sort of I apologize, man. Let me get a sip of water there. I'm so sorry. All right. So even though the Yellow Jackets sat out 1932, the Eagles don't claim anything that happened prior to 1933 as part of their history, all of what like the Browns and everything did. Ultimately, the NFL even recognizes the Eagles as an expansion team starting in 1933. So the history of the Philadelphia Eagles is not the same history as the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. It's completely its own. In fact, only one player from the Yellow Jackets that played for them in 1931 made the Eagles roster, and that was Ert Kenninger. But I think the confusion comes because the Eagles did wear those powder blue and yellow uniforms for the first couple years, similar to the ones that the Eagles wore with Donovan and Kevin Curtis and those guys. And really, it was because the colors of Philadelphia, like if you didn't know this, are that powder blue and yellow. If you look at the flag flying above City Hall, that's the color. It's basically it's because I think, and I should know this as a history teacher, I think because Philadelphia does have original roots were Swedish, and it's the color of the Swedish flag. I think is why Philadelphia's colors are that, and it's just something that's stuck. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. I'll find out for next week for sure. But I think in my head that makes sense. But again, there's lots of things in my head that I don't even know what happens. But the Eagles. So, and it's a weird thing. The throwbacks that the Eagles wore against the Lions back in 2007 are based on the Eagles uniforms from 1934, which were replicas of the Frankford Yellow Jackets jerseys. So you follow me on that? All right, either way, I will find out for sure about the colors. But the Yellow Jackets and Eagles, two separate organizations. They just happen to share the same city. So some of the legacy, I guess, of the Yellow Jackets, obviously they won the first NFL championship in Philadelphia, 1926. Lou Molinet became the first Latino to play in the NFL. He did that in 1927. Today, Philadelphia Fire Department Engine 14 out of Frankfurt has the Yellow Jackets moniker on their fire trucks. So they're kind of paying tribute to their home neighborhood team. But it was a short history, a great history for the Frankford Yellow Jackets. And as most teams during this era in all sports, they were a victim of the Great Depression. And who knows what would have happened if the Great Depression didn't happen, or if somehow the Frankfurt Athletic Association would have been able to continue on with the team. Maybe we don't have the Eagles as we have today. Maybe the Eagles and the Yellow Jackets share the city, since one would have been in the north, one would have been in the south. The possibilities are endless. But they ultimately played those 8 seasons. And again, they're often overlooked because I think of the popularity and the success of the Eagles. They did win the first championship in the NFL. And truthfully, I mean, I couldn't find any, and I can't think of any off the top of my head. I believe it's the first championship. I apologize, other than the Oakland A's or the Philadelphia A's. But like other than the A's, like I don't think any other team won a championship in Philly, and like this all happened while the A's were good too. So it must have been a great time to be a Philadelphia fan. But again, the NFL was in its infancy. So other than the A's, I mean, and we all know that this is a football town still to this day. So the fact that the Frankford Yellow Jackets often get overlooked, just like the Philadelphia A's did, it's just interesting to me. And this is like 2 times now in 3 weeks we're talking about a team that is overlooked. First NFL championship. Should they get more respect? If let me know. That's our question of the week, I guess we'll say here. Should the Frankford Yellow Jackets get more respect than they do? And we've been talking a lot over the past month or so about the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. Should the Frankford Yellow Jackets be in the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame? Are they Hall of Fame worthy? Let me know the answer to both of them this week. Leave your comment wherever you're watching or listening to this. You can find me on social media, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Jimbo_Mont. Instagram at Philly Jimbo. If you're friends with me on Facebook, you can leave a message there. Shoot me a text message, email, whatever you want. But should the Frankford Yellow Jackets have more respect, and are they Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame worthy? Let me know. All right, be sure to like and subscribe this. Tell your friends, spread the word. Let's grow this thing. Also, check out This Day in Philly Sports History every day for your daily Philly sports history lesson. We also like to do a lot of fun things for November. We're looking at Philly disappointments, the biggest disappointing athletes of all time. For instance, today was Ilya Bryzgalov of the Flyers, but we've been talking a lot about that. For December, I have a few things lined up. I'm not quite sure which direction, but it will have a holiday theme to it. Like I said, I'm working on more ways to increase the interaction. For This Day in Philly Sports History especially, be sure to like and subscribe. For Back to the Future, since it isn't necessarily based on so much a date, go check out the archives. Like I said, we did a thing on Connie Mack and the rise and fall of the Philadelphia A's. Check out the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame recap. I'll keep the link in the description wherever you're getting this, so you can check that out. But again, thank you for all of your support. Let me know what you think about the Frankford Yellow Jackets. Should they get more respect? Are they Philadelphia Hall of Fame worthy? Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Hell, tell your enemies. I don't care. Just tell somebody. Tell one person. Have them tell one person. And next thing you know, we're doing great things here. Be sure to check out our sponsors. It is the holiday season. Wouldn't be a bad time to go to Philly Goat or Car Can to do some holiday shopping. Check out my boys over at the Clashing Conferences podcast. But more importantly, it's Eagles Chiefs week, the Hall of Fame. I got Hall of Fame on my mind. The Super Bowl rematch. Go have yourselves a week. I hate Monday night, especially coming after the bye. Monday Night Football after the bye is the worst because now, no football last week. It was nice. Now I got to wait all the way till Monday. All right. Go have yourselves a week. This has been Back to the Future. I'm Jim Montgomery. Enjoy. Go Birds. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.